pedagogy where we sorry, just a moment, click somewhere. So in the andragogy domain, basically we talk about the higher education, and there are certain nuances of it. We'll just be discussing why we talk it andragogy. And another methodology of teaching, we call it heutagogy. So right now we are doing the mix of heutagogic styles in order to connect to our audience, which are primarily the students. Now, the distinguishing factor that separates from a pedagogic style to an andragogic style is the learner's maturity. Now, if we look around, if we see the class composition with which we are dealing every day, the classes that we attend, what is the level of maturity our students are showing? Now, what happens if their students basically okay, fine. Now, what happens when we talk about that my class is about a postgraduate level or undergraduate level, BBA, BCA, BTech, or on any other UG or PG program for that matter, MBA or MCA. So what is their contribution to the class? Now, I'm not speaking Greek. Mostly, don't we expect our students to add to what we are speaking all the time in the classroom? This is what I'm talking about, the contribution, extending the idea. And that idea came in 1931 when the John Dewey came up with the idea about social constructivism. So the constructivist theory says that the students must be able to contribute to the class, must be able to add to the knowledge. Now, there is a distinguishing factor between the two dimensions of teaching, because I want to decipher this myth basically right here for all of us. We all teach in the higher education sector, but we follow the pedagogic styles. Now, this is something in contravention to what we should be doing, rather than that's a contrary activity. So in pedagogic styles, I'll explain why I'm saying that's a very contradiction, because every human being is full of contradiction. We contradict ourselves every day. We believe something, we say something, but we do the opposite of it. Now, what is the opposite or the contradiction in andragogy? Andragogy means students would be able to construct knowledge, would be able to deconstruct their mental states, and would be able to comprise knowledge which is available inside the classroom, which is coming out of their teachers, and then they need to articulate these things in order to frame new ideas. So that's how innovation pops up. Fine. So every student is gravid with the ideas, but they are unable to find ways to. Where is the problem? And there comes the role of fractal dimensions. Those who are in the domain of mathematics would be knowing fractal dimensions are the repeating waves that are creating, just like cloud or the flow of water. Now, if we want to connect it with the education system, the way it persists even today, in particularly, I work in a very traditional central university. Here also previously the same model used to be followed. That means what my teacher taught me, I permeate it down as it is to my students, and my students, when they go on to become the teachers, they permeate down the same thing to their next progeny, and the trend continues. That is what I'm talking of fractal dimension. Where is the scope of innovation there? Absolutely none. This is not andragogy. Fine. So the andragogy and fractal dimensions are juxtaposed. So we need to consciously sideline the fractal dimensions as they appear. Now you may ask one simple thing, that would we not teach theories then? Obviously would we teach, but the articulation, application of the theory in developing into a new idea, developing into a new concept, testing that idea, corroboration part of it, and extending part of it. Where are those applications? So the moment we talk about it, we see, and if you could see in this diagram, it clearly talks about the assumptions of andragogy. It talks about self-directed learning, experiential learning, this preparedness, problem-centered learning, and firstly, intrinsic motivation. Now, in higher education sector, you may close your eyes and think that do we need to push your students to complete an assignment? Do you need to push your students to go for a test? Do we need to push your students to write an article? If the answer is yes, that means the students community lack intrinsic motivation. That is not andragogy. So in andragogic systems, they are empowered to take decisions. So primarily the caveat says that we will be only talking about those dimensions, those students. Now, how do we elevate to that level? That is the reason we are discussing it today, and we'll see that what are the tools available. As I think Madam has given me a very strong mandate to talk about the tools, and I'll try to speak on that particular domain. So this is the caveat. Fine. I think we are on the same page now. Let's move ahead. Now, before we start, because we all are teachers present here in this gathering, I have some interesting questions, but I do not expect that you have to revert with an answer today, but you can put your answers into the chat box. But these are some of the interesting questions which we need to address. Now, we had a COVID situation. And I think last week I was in Dhaka, Bangladesh. So I was addressing the students of Dhaka University and the faculty members. So this question was something because they have some infrastructural issues and they are still trying to cope up with COVID, as I think you would be knowing. So for them, it was a very difficult situation to cope up as teachers because most of them were, government students, they did not have that necessary infrastructure to do it. But for us, now you have in the physical classroom setting all the teaching tools that are required. So are you the same effective teacher as I used to be in the pre-COVID scenario? I don't want you to answer me, but you need to think this question. Fine, think through. Online learning? If yes, why? Because mostly if you see that even some of the institutes, they are offering online courses today, besides the physical classes. Even for my department also, Saturdays and Sundays, I take online classes for them, just mostly for the reinforcement part on the doubt clearing session. So are they accepting or resisting it? Fine. Second, is there the slack in syllabus completion? Do you find that kind of energy or that impetus is missing the way it used to be in the pre-COVID system, the way you used to complete the syllabus? Are you doing the same way? Or there is a slack, even if there is little slack in that. Now, who do we blame for it? Is it the medium or the infrastructural bottleneck? I know majority of us have the opinion that we do not have adequate infrastructure, we do not have the technology tools, or we blame the medium for it. Now, if we are talking in this morning about online medium, so if online medium has to be blamed, then the big question comes that there are a lot many edtech companies operating these days, how they are growing, how are their shares booming up, how are they being accepted. There are many companies, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to promote them, but you may know there are different companies they are promoting. So the problem to me does not arise with the medium. There may be some infrastructural bottleneck. I think the answer is up to you how you want to understand. Now, the big question, the most important question. So is ERT as the same as blended learning? ERT stands for emergency remote teaching. The same as the blended learning? Because I do not know what your experiences, what were your experiences, but in the Northeast, in my university or in some part of India, we have, wherever I have been able to visit, I find there was a section of students who were resisting online learning like anything. And there were not many people, many professors wrote articles on that. But my question is that emergency remote teaching and blended learning, are they one and the same thing? This is my humble question to the academic fraternity. And I would like to submit they are completely different things. When you are struck by a disaster like COVID, you had no other option but to switch to online learning. It was a forceful decision imposed upon you. And in many of my articles, I wrote that even if the colleges are shut, the learning must continue. So in your endeavor not to, stop learning, because I know whether you are aware of it or not, in the school education, though I promised I'll not be talking, but I want to refer to not one, but a couple of incidents. UN report on West Bengal or in UP, it has clearly mandated that the government schools which could not afford online learning, they had to shut their shop for the 2 year duration. And the young girls were married off. And some of them, when they were contacted later on, where after the resumption of the physical classes in those schools, when teachers went to visit them, many of them were having a child on their laps. So this is one big trouble. I understand. But even having said so, I would like to again, revisit our decision about blaming the blended learning models, because blended learning means physical as well as online. So they need to be properly planned and programmed. So emergency remote teaching is not as blended learning. So this is something which we need to believe, and we need to, pursue our discussions on in this line. Fine. Now, this used to be a classroom. Now, I do not know how many of you have the experience of, interacting students in this classroom domain. This used to be a pre-COVID scenario, and now at the post-COVID scenario, this has been the structure of your classroom. Even today, right now, the session that we are conducting right now, so it's similar like that. Now that takes us to a couple of very interesting questions. Now here I will take a pause, and I would invite your suggestions on that. The question is very simple. Should we hold the time constant and make learning variable, or other way around? So if there are any responses if you want to give, so I take, there are a couple of questions which I want to start the session. So if anyone wants to answer, or maybe share their thoughts, because we all are teachers here. So I'd like to take a couple of feedbacks here with the permission of Supritika. Yeah, Dr. Pawan, I think you have. Should I open the chat box? Learning should be variable. Okay, fine. I put it on this side of the screen. Okay, other way around. Okay, fine. Already we are having contradictions. Good. Yeah. Any other participants who'd like to throw some light on it? Because this is the first question which we'd like to address, because if you're talking about the pedagogical structures, the other way around. Okay. Anybody else? Fine. I think we have many more questions where you can participate. Why I'm asking this question? Because in your class, if you look around, there will be category of learners. Fine. There are different categories of learners. Some would be fast learners, some would be slow learners. Now, in a physical setting, in a physical classroom, how do you take care of your slow learners or medium paced learners? Do you have any built-in mechanism to do that? Yeah, some institutes do have some counseling sessions, some institutes have a mentoring sessions, but do they provide the dividends? Have you thought over it, that would be the psychological condition of a student if that student is termed as a slow learner? I do not know whether you have come across any student who deems himself or herself to be a slow learner and walks up to your office. If that person has got the courageous self, they would definitely work it, but usually they do not prefer to be termed or labeled as slow learners. So for them, what mechanism we can think? Fine. Now that takes us to the second important question. How do we map and manage aspirations of a learner? Yeah, I think because you all are handling students, so you are competent enough to answer this question. So how do you map it? How do we map and manage aspirations? Because every learner, from where the aspiration comes, that I have seen in the last, I think, 23 years when I'm teaching, I see that, students would say that we have been taught by the same teacher, same book, same syllabus, same classroom, perhaps on the same bench also. But how does it that he gets a better package, I don't, he gets a placement, I don't, he gets 70%, I don't. So now this is aspirational management one has to do. Either you tell them that, see, you are incompetent, or you need to plan out certain or devise some strategies in order to help them out so that they become equally potent. So these two questions, and then finally that takes us to another interesting question, that higher education expenses are rising. So how do I ensure the ROI? Now that's a very tricky question. Many of you would not, uh, may believe that I'm talking about, because I'm comparing with ROI with the education. When you talk about, their, because education cannot be compared with finance, because Lakshmi and Saraswati should not be compared. But apart from all things, let's be very sure. Think about the student who takes an education loan. He needs to pay it off, or she needs to pay it off. How they are going to do it? So for them, the course or MBA or BBA or MC or BTech, whatever they have done, it needs to return some amount so that he is able to stand on his or her own feet to pay off the loans that somebody has taken. So the expenses somebody has to bear. Mostly in India, what happens? The parents take the charge, or maybe the elderly and the people, they fund the education of children. But worldwide, they have to do it. They manage their own higher education expenses, because for them, it's the incumbent upon the candidate to fund for their studies. This is one important question. Now, this question is for the teachers like us, that are we ready to acquire new skills, completely retrain in order to remain employable in the future? Because this is something very, very important, because COVID has shown us that, the online classes, the system which we are doing, I do not know how many of you are already conversant with it, because in my university, even today, the professors need the support of their PhD scholars if we have to do a meeting. Even in sometimes we have to have ministerial meetings, and everybody is using a different online platform. Somebody is using the e-Vidyas, somebody is using NIC's own platform, somebody using Google platform, MS Teams. So we have seen people how difficult they found themselves to conduct classes. Many of them could not conduct classes for months together, for the fear that they do not know which button to press and how to, switch on the videos, how to switch off the audio. And even today, when we have online meetings, we have difficulties. So that kind of requirement is already there. So we are shifting, because Education 4.0 is talking about a very emerging shift that is happening, and not slowly, at a very fast pace. And it is also rendering many, I'll not say, but it's actually very, very uncomfortable to say that many professors who were very noteworthy, in terms of their contribution or in terms of their achievements, they are finding it extremely difficult to cope up. They're finding it extremely difficult, because in many of our workshops also, many senior professors, they decline to attend classes. So this is a requirement. I do not know that happened to your university or not, because I presume mostly you are very young chap. So I think you can learn well. But think about those universities where we have 50 plus or 50, 60 plus professors who are teaching the classes. But they were very effective in the pre-COVID situation. But now in this domain is posing a very serious challenge. That we're talking about us. And then now here we are going to ask about, I'm going to seek your opinion on that. How do we ensure the students are learning? I mean, this is a very intriguing question for me. And if anybody would like to throw some light on it, I mean, if you can unmute yourself and speak, or if you want to put into the chat box, that also you're most welcome to. But tell me, or give me an answer, that how do you know when you enter into the class, when you deliver a talk, when you speak with them, we talk, and then how do you ensure that your students are learning? I mean, is there any mechanism? By asking questions in a lecture, fine. Sheetal madam has given very interesting view that by asking questions based on the topic we taught. Isn't it very superficial? Because you have given some input. First of all, what do you mean by learning? I mean, how do we define learning? Then we talk about how to ensure. Does it mean that I taught something, maybe chapter 101, first chapter, first volume? Okay, Dr. Pawan has given certain questions arise in their mind. Okay, let me just ask the question again, then I'll come back. This is a very interesting part. And let's say I go to the class. Okay, fine. With practical performance. Okay, so is examination. Let's say I go to the class, I teach something to chapter 101, and then I ask some questions. So that, is it not rote learning? I mean, you may prove me wrong, but I memorize this part and then we reproduce it. One thing, now I think the previous speaker was talking about Bloom's taxonomy. I do not know whether he or she has explained it or not, but I'll not get into that theoretical domain, but I'd like to, if you have seen the Bloom's taxonomy talks about the journey from remembered to apply. Fine. So memorizing, memorization is also an activity in learning process, but how do we apply them? Now that apply does not mean always you need to reproduce what has been taught, but one single word, I think I was expecting that, but it was not there, but I hope you all know, but it's in different connotations you all would be knowing. We talk about articulation. Very simple. So learning primarily means the distance travel. Fine. Learning gain also talks about that distance travel from A to B. Fine. So now, if I want to understand that whether the students are learning or not, because many, okay. So Biju has given, based on my lecture or lab session, if students can design, yes, exactly. Design, implement any project, I can say my students have learned from a session. That's what I'm talking. That's the articulation part. Very good, very good. This is what I was thinking, that we are able to articulate. Now, what kind of mechanisms we have built into our syllabus to ensure that? Sometimes we'll have an answer that we have examination which talks about it. But do you think examination or maybe asking a couple of questions are more than sufficient to check a student's learning ability? Now, if you remember, I think when during UPA 1, I guess we had in school education, CCE was there, had comprehensive cumulative evaluation or cumulative comprehensive something. I'm not sure certain about. Have seen they were marking each student on various abilities. So a very long sheet, I think A3 sheet, and they were with multiple boxes and they were checking them. It was a tedious task, but activity or the agenda was very clear that one student is not good at academics, maybe good at sports, maybe good at music, maybe good at social skills. So can there be a mechanism, which I think NEP is also talking about these days, that skill development, skill measurement. So how I'm going to do it? So if we want to understand whether a student is learning or not, the first thing we want to ensure that what skill I'm trying to impart in our students and how they are learning. I think either we have got a very good response that I'm talking about design, implement any project. So that means I'm trying to inculcate some skills. So skills that are the testimony of one's learning abilities. Now you will be seeing that there are, why I'm asking these questions. I hope these are very generic questions, but still we need to sensitize ourselves over the time. You will be seeing that in your classroom, there are some students who are 90 percentile wala, or maybe sometimes they are scoring the 101. But if you ask them to do anything, if you want to ask them to exhibit their skills, sometimes they fall short of your expectation. Why? Because they have only learned to reproduce. I'm talking about the fractal dimension. If you remember, we just said a few times back. But at least they could talk about how they are going to evolve and practice it. Fine. That takes us to the next question, which we are to talk about. That how do you measure the learning gain? Now, this is another intriguing question, which I'm going to tickle your mind on that. That how do you measure it, whether they have learned? What is the measurement criteria? Is there any particular measurement criterion on that basis you could evaluate all your students, or there are multiple criteria? I mean, this is something I just I'm very keen to know if you could enlighten me on that, because every student is medical science also says that the intelligence level is same, is only in, unless until there is some medical condition. I mean, physically, or maybe somebody is incapable of thinking, or maybe some psychological issue. That's apart from that, intelligence level on a 90 percentile and a 40 percentile, they are the same. Only difference comes in the term of their application, retention, and extension of the ideas. That's a psychological journals you scan through, you will find it. But I would like to know from you that how do we measure the learning gain? Because learning gain, we have just now discussed about the distance traveled. That means the first day they entered in your class, the semester ends. This journey, fine. So how are you going to measure that? How you are going to evaluate them? You will say that we conduct examination. So my question, is it sufficient? Presentations, tutorials, one-on-one discussions, or maybe the grapevine calls, or it may be the self-paced learning, assignment submission. There are multitude of tools are there, and collectively we do it. And for that reason, we must have a solid mechanism to check. Like in some institutes, they have internal tests followed by case discussions, followed by presentations. So there are multitude of layers of evaluation practices you have set, so that with which a student has to pass through in order to secure a grade, that a student is capable of doing so. So you test them under different dimensions. Now the question is, what is the perfect measure do you think you want to apply to measure the learning gain for our students? So anybody, I'll pause for a moment and I'll expect one or two responses. Is my question clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the I mean, objective is very clear, because I'm teacher, I teach in my class. I want to be sure that my students are learning and they are learning gainfully. That means they can apply it. So how do I know they are doing it or not? Because whether they are able to implement it in my class or not, that's a different part that comes post facto. But the pre-facto measure, how I'm going to ensure it. Fine. This is a question I'm leaving with you here, and then we'll come back later on. You may start thinking on that also. Okay. Now, a little bit of theory. I hope I'll not going to bore you to the depth for the theoretical part, because I'm little traditional researcher. So all my work is based on the theory. So I hope many of you have, those who work in the area of learning continuity, they have gone through these theories, but I want to highlight. I'm not going to read out for you. I think that would be an insult to the audience, but I'll have to pick up some important factors here, because Knowles in 1980 given the teaching learning continuum. So it has talked about one important aspect is self-learning. So if you are talking about learning gain, if you see the students are so self-directed, this is the, when they are the epitome of maturity, they learn themselves. How many times it has happened, it has occurred to you that a student walks up to your office and tells you that, sir, I have, you have, sir or ma'am, you have taught us this thing, but I went to the library, I searched for the books, and I found that there's another book which talks about what you have said, but there's a difference. Likewise, this kind of engaging discussions. How often we all vie for it, we all clamor for it, we all going to die for that kind of students to come up to it. So now this is what I'm talking about, self-learning. And teaching learning continuum says that when a student starts doing that kind of activity, that means students has left the path of pedagogy and moving towards andragogy. That means students has grown enough in terms of maturity. And then Vygotsky, Dewey, and they have already discarded the concept of memory-based rote learning. And they have said this is actually not andragogy. This is not higher education. But unfortunately, whatever we may say, this has been the predicament for our Indian higher education sector, that we appreciate those who score high marks, and we have a pattern of asking questions which the students also know, with a rare opportunity to exercise freedom of making questions the different pattern. But students usually they know what kind of questions they are going to come, they mug it up and they score good marks. But this has been rejected. And if you could look at the year in 1934, which is close to, I guess, 90 years or 90 or 86, almost a, I mean, century old concept, but still we are free. Then we need to introspect where do we stand. Fine. And peer learning, the social constructivism, cognitive constructivism, you know, the peer evaluation. Now, I mean, I do not know whether you have that situation or not, but in some cases I have got, you are conducting a case study situation. How often do you get that in the classroom when a student is presenting, his peers are asking or bombarding him or her with tough questions? Fine, I am indoor for some event. I found that whenever the case presentation is going on, they have a very strong discussion and debate, and it continues for 3 to 4 hours. And the teacher is playing the role of moderator. That's an ideal situation. So now, while you are debating, while you are discussing, you are also learning. So by that time, you are referring to the various data sources. You have various information sources. From there, you are evolving. So that is a very powerful learning mechanism that has been proposed long back. But we, unfortunately, I do not know how many of you have that kind of experience. But in my case, I find it very rare, very rare. Now we move ahead and talk about the Piaget cognitive development part, which is talking about the role of the environment. Because right now you would be knowing, those who are in the learning domain, that the institutional learning is considered to be a complex adaptive system, or CAS. Using agile method of learning, institution plays a very pivotal and active role in fostering learning systems. Fine. Now, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPD, which came 1978, is suggests that if a student, now listen to me very carefully, if a student is unable to solve a problem, I think we get those kind of students in our everyday life. So it says that if a student is unable to solve a problem, but if he can get a service or the help from the environment through the peers or the infrastructure, or through some software mechanism, that person can extend his or her contribution. Now, this is such a powerful thing, where the environment, this is the beauty of blended learning, that the system supports one's learning endeavor. Fine. Let me repeat what I'm trying to tell you, because let's say I'm a student. I go to a class, I go to my school, I go to my department, attend a library, but then an assignment comes my way, but I'm unable to find it. So who should I be look upon to? I look upon to initially my peers. I look up to my teachers, my softwares, my books, and library. So if that environment is enabling, and then perhaps the problem which would have taken me to solve around, let's say, 2 days or 3 days, I could solve in a single day. So this is where the institutional oneness with the environment comes into the forefront. This is what Education 4.0, the agility part I'm talking about. Because Education 4.0, it took its name from the Industry 4.0, and the basic, the building block of this 4.0 concept was of agility, the reduced cycle time. And how I'm going to reduce the cycle time? By providing the infrastructural support to the people. And that's how we have to prosper. That's how we need to prosper along with time and helping the students. Fine. Next, we talk about the learner's satisfaction, and there's a different dimension, so we're not getting into it. But primarily, let us know that in learning domain, there are basically 3 domains are there. Fine. I hope it has been discussed, but I'm not going to repeat all the time. But for our common understanding, we are talking about the 3 domains. We start off with the cognitive domain, which is psychological in nature. How you know your mental makeup, your mental balance. Second is your affective domain, that is your social skills about your morality, about your ethics and values. And third is psychomotor, the action-oriented doing. And these three learning domains, when they assemble together, they give your next or the fourth domain, the reflective domain. So therefore, we can say that the students have learned gainfully by looking at their reflective domain, where they reflect upon all their cognitive, affective, and psychomotor movements. Fine. So now when they are trying to do so, invariably they are doing it, but the quality of those reflections need to be monitored and administered by the teachers so that they can be directed towards. Now, one thing I'm going to talk, one other important theory, which is little later it came in 2004, George Simmons, he talked about the connectivism theory. Connectivism theory very powerfully talks about that network learning, they provide the students a lot of opportunity, which is an extension about the ZPD, which you have just now taught. And because today we have everybody connected, because these theories when came up earlier in 70s, this time internet was not that popular and it was not being created also. So in 2004, Simmons found that if we have an interconnections, like in COVID, if you have seen, many universities had opened their libraries online for the people. So if I'm having that kind of interconnection, so my learning gets boosted. Fine. Now we talk about the blended learning. The blended learning, again, I'm reiterating, you must inscribe in your heart that it is a planned technology intervention, planned learning intervention. It is never an emergency situation exposure. It is always planned well in advance, that what is the percentage, what is the amount of blend between physical and technology you are going to do in your classroom, what is the requirement and how we are going to administer them. I give you one simple example. Recently, I think we had done a study in Bangladesh, in Rajshahi district, in the primary schools. Fine. So we have identified 2 primary schools, and it was a part of a project actually. And there were, I think, 144 children we interviewed, we interviewed. Cannot interview a child per se. We just chatted with them. We have observed them for sitting there, and we could find that the syllabus in CBSE also you have seen, in school education also you have seen, is so structured that the teacher was showing their smart board one picture of a butterfly, and every children were dancing. So effectively what happens, you cannot get a butterfly every day, but if you have to complete a syllabus, you have to show it to them. And the videos were there, music were there. So the engagement we could see was instantaneous. So therefore, I mean, this is one such part. And therefore I asked the students that how do what is your reaction? How do you see the butterfly? And they could connect. And then they were taken to the open field, and their children were chasing the butterflies that they were available. So initially you have built in the idea about a butterfly, online medium. Now you are blending it with the physical one, so flipped classroom mode. So there are different techniques with which we can do it. In medical science also, they are, they are trying to create the 3D imaging, 3D part of those part. For management studies also, we do a lot of simulation games online, and then we try to take them to the field and do it. So now the basic part which I'm talking about, that the technology mediated learning is actually is providing extension, learning on the go, the ubiquitous learning, anywhere they can learn. Fine, you offered them that kind of an infrastructural support through the LMS or LCMS, so they can learn it. So probably blended learning needs to be planned in well in advance, and therefore like the liberation of education 4.6. Fine. Now the question is, where is the problem? Fine. So if we guys look at, we could see that for the aspirational part, we could see that for a student, there is a maxim between 2 sides. One, the preparedness, expectation. I hope you could always connect with your own students. And if they are supported by competency and creativity, they are able to map the expectation. But for ourselves, for most of the cases, we find that aspiration level is very high, but preparedness is equally low. So this is what the basic problem, the student community that they are facing, because they perceive certain things without their associated complications. Now, when we talk about blended learning, many of the instances I have seen that if we provide them online study material, it's just not giving them the whole book, ebook. It might not solve the purpose. But rather, if we could offer them assignments, if we could, show them the smaller skillets texts for which they can easily read and come back with a solution. So that is a mechanism of preparedness. I have seen in many instances of many colleges, students are provided with the huge online books. So somewhere we get those 10, 20 books and share it with them. And we expect them to read it. So now we have to look at ourselves. How comfortable are we in reading a 300-page online book? At least I evaluate PhD thesis for many universities, but I'm still a traditional one because my connect is not there. I always request for the complete thesis to be sent to me. Now, if that has been on an LMS platform where I can flip the different pages altogether, maybe I can highlight some part of it. So just like what kind of services Amazon Kindle provides, so we will be in a better position to evaluate, we're in a better position to do it. So this is, I'm talking about a planned intervention and unplanned part. In our offices, I have seen, you will be in government offices, I think you must be receiving notices from AICT or ministry. They simply scan a letter and send it to you without, with complete disregard to your mailbox size. So this is not actually online or blended learning. Blended learning will come when you break down the syllabus, you break down the component, map it with the objective, and accordingly learning prescriptions are provided to you. Then only you can match the preparedness and the expectation part. Fine. Now we have talked about at great length about the NEP. I think this is also because we are finalizing the NEP. Just now we have completed, and I am advisor to 2 institutions for their NEP syllabus preparation. Everywhere we are talking about 2 important components. One is the flexibility, and second one is the skill development. What you want your students to learn, and education 4.0, hammers consistently on these 2 concepts. Fine. Because education 4.0, many of you would not know that it is giving rise to a new breed of students, which they are called non-traditional students, will be coming very soon. Second part, I'm talking about the developing or providing them the flexibility and skill, that if I need to learn something, for example, I'm teaching the subjects. When I was a student, most of them were not there. And those who are of my age or maybe having, they are in the industry for last 20, 25 or 30 years, they must be teaching the subjects. Those courses for us were not there. Like analytics, it was not there 20 years back. Supply chain management, it was not there 20 years back. Digital marketing was not there 20 years back. Now you need to teach them. So for that, we have been able to retrain ourselves, and consistently we are doing so. So now when we talk about it, so for the students also, we must provide them the flexibility that they can learn things at their own peril, and then they grow up from there. And every course, NEP says, it must provide some skills that I think one of the participants, Mr. Biju, has very effectively mentioned that, when I teach something, any design activity, any activity for that matter, you are teaching programming, you are teaching database designing, you are teaching website coding, so they are able to do it. So that kind of element part which NEP is insisted, which we need to do. Now, I would like to, we talked about how I'm going to measure my students are learning gains. So this is the matrix which I want to share with all of you. Now, these are the 4 categories of students present in every class. Now, if you look at in your class cohort will comprise of all of these cohorts in the one same class, be it an engineering class, be it a management or any class. So now let me explain the categories of the students. The first category we talk about the induced learners. Now, what do you mean by induced learners? Induced learners are those who have limited engagement with the content and equally limited time. That means you started up reading it, or maybe you do not give enough time. Fine. Second categories are the traditional learners who have all the time but don't study. They all preserve it for the examination. So when the examination will come, they will study and complete. Third category are the rote learners, the fractal dimensions which I was talking. They have very engagement, but very quickly they want to do it. Maybe for the immediately for the examination, they will prepare, and with a very limited time, they want to learn a lot of things. So in the process, they start ending up mugging up things. Fine. Fourth category is about the matured learners. We want them to be there. We have your active engagement with the content. They have very active time spent on the syllabus or the study mid time or the curriculum. So they are the people who are the trailblazers of andragogic intervention, where they, prosper by doing, articulating, by reflecting the skills they have been imparted upon, and they reflect upon those skills. So this is basically what we try to do. This is what try to create this infrastructure. And there are certain important hypotheses. The hypothesis first says that there are no student beyond these four matrix in your class. Either they would be induced state or traditional or rote or mature state. But these positions are not stationary. That means if one student is a rote learner, that does not mean throughout his tenure with the course, he will remain so. He may fall back to induced category because if he loses interest into it, or he can be promoted to the matured category if he takes more interest into the curriculum and starts studying. So this is a moving matrix which we try to realize in all cases, and we try to identify those small components and we try to put them. So this is the job of a teacher, to develop this particular matrix and put the students into those matrices according to their evaluation pattern. How do you treat them? Fine. Another important factor, that one student may be a matured student in subject A does not mean for all subjects he or she will remain so. So therefore, what do we get? We have to go for subject specific evaluation for the students and placing them into this matrix, and we continuously map them over months or over maybe different time intervals which are deemed fit for the teachers to do so. So what you could possibly do, you can just find out that for subject A somebody is mature learner, for subject B somebody in traditional one. So the overall you get a map of a student, and thereby you can evaluate a student's learning capacity, and accordingly you can prescribe them the prescriptions which they should consume in order to prosper, because objective will remain the same. We all of us, because the maximum density would prefer to be there in that mature category. Fine. Now it's always easier said than done, because we do have our own issues. We have a syllabus based study, you have a very classroom based study. We do not, and we have the face to face knowledge dissemination sometimes preferred over others. Now blended learning talks about, it does not take away the credit of face to face learning. It says that whatever you want to blend, you blend it keeping in mind the basic learning objectives or LOBs. I think we all prepare syllabus in our institutions, and we always first think what is the learning objective. Accordingly, we plan our sessions, we plan our hours, we prescribe the books to be studied, because we all want to achieve a specific objective which we have mentioned in that LOB page of it. So now we do have a challenge, because if one good teacher is teaching in one class, and for a different distance, there are multiple institutions are there, multiple institutions there have multiple branches. So those situations are troubling us, and it's a practical problem. In many institutes are facing those kind of situations. So we need to overcome them. So therefore, the blend comes here. Fine. Now learning again, I think we have already talked. I'll just skip it here. Now I'll take you to the next part, which we talk about the learning continuity, which is a very integral part of our discussion, where we try to take things up, where we talk about that we are talking about personalized and adaptive learning, which is flexible, allowing the cognitive flexibility. Now, what does it mean? Because in online learning system, everybody wants to be trained individually. Everybody needs personal care. You have seen some of the ed tech company, they are advertising about benefit of having two teachers in a classroom, that everybody is at their disposal. This is the example which we are trying to highlight about a personalized learning, and adaptive in the sense that you continuously evolve with the content. You change your track, change your thought process. For all different ed tech companies, if you could look at, we find that they keep you, or they direct you to a particular way of learning. And cognitively or psychologically, they make you very strong about one learning aspirations. For the very simple reason, we do not have one size fits all kind of program, but we offer them. Like if I am studying MSc in zoology or MSc in botany, maybe I'm not good at in all subjects, but I have to do this curriculum, I have to do this part, because in order to get a master's degree. Or maybe I'm talking about MSc computer science, I may be good at programming, but I'm not very good at mathematics for that matter. So those kind of situations are the major challenges which are posing, and they are promoting, or they are allowing the systems to evolve. And self-learning is usually is important for development of a critical thinking ability, which is again another nuance of our NEP also, that we need to foster the critical thinking ability. Currently, we try to use an LMS. I hope many institutes are using it, but some of the cases they are not there. So one individual was talking about the various use of learning uh, management systems, because here I want to take a pause and talk about one simple aspect, that when we talk about learning management systems, when we talk about the ERP applications, when we talk about learning content management system, basically what we try to do, we try to induce a mechanism of continuous tracking and monitoring. Fine. I think the previous speaker was talking about the educational institution IS, or learning management IS. So these things are very powerfully done. In my university, perhaps my department is the only one who is using it. Other, we have only using an online content management system. But primarily, what needs to be done here is to follow each and every student's one growth pattern. Once we start monitoring them, once we start following it up with how they are progressing, how they are regressing, constant monitoring needs to be done. Once we start doing it, we can easily track that how far they are, what is their growth curve, what is their growth pattern. Then we talk about the assessment. I do not know how many institutes actually analyze the data. I mean, talking about their mean, median, mode, the central tendency measurements, they do it or not. Because if you do it consistently for all your internals, so partially you will be in a better position to help your students to achieve better grades in the next examination. Is what happens in that process, you will know that where the student stands, which is somewhat closer to the matrix which you have just now we have discussed. Fine. And we are, as I have told already, that we talk about ubiquitous learning, that learning can happen anywhere. So and that is actually giving rise to a new breed, which, as we said, that non-traditional students, because I am working somewhere, like we must have heard about on the job training. Now likewise, if I've been able to attain minimum degree, because there are a lot of online universities have come up, and many institutes tied up with them. But I hope you must be aware that AICT has recently struck down those kind of associations, but over a period of time, they are only going to prosper, because there are institutes, there are companies who would only care about the skill you have it or not. It doesn't really matter from where you have learned it or not. I remember, I think 22, 3 years back, I was in Chennai, and there was used to be a company. I hope many of you would know that, called Polaris and Kashyap Radiant, two companies which I don't know whether they exist anymore, but it used to a big IT company. So these companies, they did not have any kind of restrictions about taking hiring engineering grads or tech grads, or you know they used to conduct a test. whosoever is able to clear it, be it BA, BCom, BSc, doesn't matter. If you want to clear it, you can come in. So these kind of, I'll say, the structural change is going to, I'll not say upset, but going to shake up the education industry as I perceive, because it is a superstructure. Because earlier, what used to be there? Earlier, it used to be specific background, specific skills as believed, perceived domains. Because if you are not an engineering or computer science graduate, certain skills will not be taught to you. If you are just a BA graduate, you would never be taught about programming. But if you can learn from somewhere, you are equally, you can compete with them. But there were restrictive practices were there. They won't allow you. Only the engineering graduates could compete. Now these things are getting diluted. People or the companies who are only vying for the skills. Now, in this given context, the capturing the data about the skills of our students become immensely important. Fine. Now, we talked about this didactical learning, which is from Alison King, which has given the concept of the flipped classroom, how I'm going to learn from the experiences. This is a very important part of learning. That is the reason many organizations these days, they organize training. And recently, I think yesterday, I was with the Reserve Bank and I was training their officials. Though I am not a man from banking, so they said we want to bring in diversity. So what I was there, my job primarily was to listen to the problems they are facing and then talk about the emotional intelligence part on them and how does learning happens from them. So what was there primarily, they needed a window to vent out. Now, this is one, the empathy part, which I had talked about earlier, which is coming out in a big way in for design thinking approach for every single classes that we may work in blended learning tools also. In blended learning, one part is about your technology, other part is about your soft skill. The first step in soft skill is about the empathy. A student is unable to cope up with the pressure. How do you deal with them? The first thing or the least that you could do to listen to his or her problems. And that's how you develop it. Now, in flipped classroom mode, what happens? You have the experiences. So if you are experienced enough, with your experiences, you can, counsel a student. You can talk about the different methodology, because experiential learning is a very powerful methodology to win over even the most difficult conditions. The students who having learning disabilities, if you can sit with them with a lot of patience, you can help them in order to learn. Fine. And then the digital divide part, I do not know the part, I mean, you belong to whether this exists or not, but for us in Northeast or maybe in Uttarakhand, you will be saying in remote areas, digital divide is a very, very, very big challenge. For us, the students, the fees are very less in government institutions, but affording a mobile device or a laptop is still a luxury for many of them. So those issues are still there. I mean, I'm talking about a policy level matter, because if we talk education 4.0, we cannot exclude the environment into, because the oneness of environment with the students is a very important aspect of education 4.0, which clearly mandates that if you want to talk about, if you want to talk about collective development, the social inclusion factor, so that this digital divide, the gap needs to be narrowed down, if not completely zero. Fine. Now, my experience says that students, they like blended learning. I mean, if you ask me that, you can always counter me, because in my last 2 decades, I have seen that students, they prefer, because for example, if you are teaching in a theoretical class, maybe after 2 o'clock, post lunch session, I do not know what has been your experiences, but I have seen they prefer to doze up. But one video, one audio, one video case, one exercise, one technology intervention, it can energize the boost the classroom part. So for that matter, students also prefer, but you need to plan it. So you cannot just switch on the video and exit the class and take a cup of coffee or tea. So it needs to be administered, monitored, supervised learning must be there. So that if you supervise them in the class, they can take the self-learning path when they are at their own peril, at their own homes or their library. Fine. So this is one grid I'm going to just to put across whatever we have discussed. This is what we had done in 2019, one of my models which we have created. That we want to track the flexibility component vis-a-vis the instructional delivery. So the flexibility means how it's not a very claustrophobic, rigid curriculum-based structure. If there is scope for students taking up courses. Now, I hope in many of your institutes and you are following the choice-based credit system, the CBCS. Right now, the VC and CC has come for NEP, extracurricular courses, the vocational courses. So this is the flexibility the student has. The specialization also is a part of flexibility when the students exercise their choice of picking up a subject. And then we talk about the instructional delivery part. Now, if you want to track them, so you find that in education 1.0, which was purely chalk and talk method, traditional classroom, the instructional delivery was basically sage on the stage kind of a model. And then we have this very low flexibility. And then came the education 2.0, where we have intermittent use of technology. Then came education 3.0, where we have the online learning. And then we came the time of education 4.0, which has given rise to the highest level of flexibility and purely online, uh, sorry, purely online instructional delivery. Now, going by the same pattern, if we could look at this model, if we concentrate, this is another important dimension. If you could see, this agile methodology has given rise to this education 4.0, because institutions have become a product of complex adaptive system. Fine. And there are two important concepts where I want to draw your attention. I'll talk about a little bit of psychology. One is metacognition, second one is meta literacy. Now, this cognition we all know about psychological part. Literacy we all know about the ability to read and write. But meta literacy means your own idea about yourself, how far you know. This is something, one very intriguing factor. I think you must have had this experience in your class that you have delivered a talk, you have delivered a lecture, and the students have said that, okay, I have understood everything. Or maybe they have not responded to it yet. But when you question them back, they will revert a void answer. Why? Because they did not understand, but they told themselves we understood it because my classmates sitting next to me understood it. This is the meta literacy component. I mean, about of deceiving yourself. And meta literacy means your own, assessment about your learning part. And metacognition means your own assessment about your psychological activities. So that has been the hallmark of education 3.0 when we have online learning, because there we had assisted learning, there we had unassisted learning, we had self-paced learning, we have intermittent use of technology, different interventions were practiced in education 3.0. And that has given rise to the quick cycle time, the prompt short skillet courses, 15-day curriculum, 10-day curriculum, and then the modes were altered. And that has given to the rise of the next one, the education 4.0, where we have the non-traditional students, their volume, that is purely rising in this context. Fine. And they are fairly a phenomena post 2020s. The COVID time has given. Now, what we need to have, every student is producing humongous data, their assessments, their records, their syllabus, their curriculum, but mostly they are unstructured, which are coming from different shapes and sizes, huge variety. But we need to find a pattern in them. We need to identify a particular pattern in their behavior, how they are learning. This is the most critical part. And for that, we must have, the role of the teacher becoming very, very prominent here, because this is what I think that we are no more simple teachers. We all are analysts in some of the other capacities and are the facilitators inside the classroom, where we try to analyze their responses, and we do not sleep on that. We try to help them, we try to evaluate them, what works and what does not. And that takes us to the next important dimension about non-traditional students. What do they do? Non-traditional students primarily, and they are increasing in number. I'm warning you, You will be seeing in another 5 years time, the enrollments in the traditional classrooms are going to suffer a big lot. But India, it might not be having a tremendous effect because we are having a huge, I think 1.45 billion population, those would be not there. But that volume is going to increase who think that they can take their own decisions. Fine. And they want to do those courses which are having a quick return on investment. In many of our faculties also, they are teaching advertisement. Before they're getting into the course, they are taking a 15 days curriculum on advertising. They quickly learn it and they practice it. They know what is to be taught and they get inside the classroom. It's so easy. So those kind of students, those kind of skill sets, those kind of practices are in high demand. Fine. And then it saves their time. They don't need to check their job. They are going ahead with it. Because education 4.0, again, I'm reiterating again and again, because understand this non-traditional students, if you are non-traditional students, student, you are not alone. There are many such people who are prospering, who are developing, and you will find there are a lot of forums are there. No, I do not know. I mean, how many of you are into the art, programming, or coding? Now, if you get stuck, who do you refer to? I do not think you refer to any book for that matter. You always go back to the forums in which you are also a member. So those kind of non-traditional groups, they post problems, post solutions. These kind of tendencies, this sector is growing in a big time. Fine. Now, if we talk about the agility part, because I have very categorically mentioned that our education system is nothing but a complex adaptive system with the interplay of laboratory, students, teachers, institutional administrations, every single thing they contribute in that domain. Fine. And they all learn in very shorter cycle times in syllabus. Agile programming in Scrum or software engineering, we all know. But in education system, the use of agile learning routines are quite new in the context that you create shorter cycle time, maybe a 7 days program, 15 days curriculum, intensive program, and you can alter it depending on the sizes. Fine. The basic objective will always remain the same, that focus what you want to achieve, and you learn hands-on, skill-based, and then you go on iteration. You constantly you keep on doing it so that you can have a better response all the time. So the output is coming in a big way, it's better all the time. Fine. So now we have this, more important part, how LMS is helping. I think this has been already spoken, so I'm not going to repeat that because previous speaker already was talking about it. So I'll not reiterate and repeat whatever has been said. I think I'm going to only highlight one thing, because knowledge management again is my core area. You should know what your students are doing and what they are going to do, or you can predict their performance. Those things, learning analytics has been there with us, and education 4.0 provides us this kind of impetus for us. The dropout prediction systems, live statistics, and many institutes, some institutes follow, some do not, but sooner or later also we have to do that, otherwise we will be losing out on the enrollment. That's a very important part, but we can prevent such things from happening. Fine. And then we need to track the individual progress versus group progress and put them into the matrix which we have discussed about it. Fine. And there are multiple tools anyone we can use. Moodle is a free tool, I guess. If you are using it, Moodle, then fine. Otherwise, there are multiple tools out there. Take any one of them, open sources, configure it, start using it, and you will see the benefit of it. Fine. So I think with that, I conclude my speech. And I think if there are any questions, I'd like to interact with you all if there are any questions. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your session.
Any participant is having any question? Sir, I would like to ask a question.
Yeah,
now when we are talking about not pedagogy, but other two techniques for higher education, how can we go for assessment in these other two techniques?
Ma'am, these things are not new, rather, these things are there since ages. It's just that we have been aware of it lately, because mostly wherever I go, I see that even the university professors, they all talk about pedagogy, but let's understand there are pedagogy primarily talks about assistive learning, but in andragogy, it should be self-directed learning. This is why you have to understand, because for example, if you have a grown-up kid at home and you are feeding them, we do it, we don't do it, right? I mean, I have got a son who is, in the class 12. So tomorrow, I think he is in a postgraduate level, for example. How many times we have seen that the student is a postgraduate level, the mother or father is feeding them? It's a rare thing, right? So that's exactly what we are doing in the education system. We are feeding them, giving them the notes. But that should be, your role in the class, as I said, is more like a facilitator as an analyst. Facilitator means you introduce a topic, you introduce a subject, you give them the content, ask them to prepare, ask them to make a presentation of it, give them questions to solve, ask them, the whole world is in front of you, search, scan, dig, borrow, steal, break the answer. And then you, as a role of analyst, you analyze their answer, give them feedback. That's the way the evaluation should take place. Because, and in the process, what happens, traditional model, I have certain idea about a question. Fine. So I'm asking, what is marketing, for example, or maybe what is programming, or what is financial management. So I have a set answer in my mind. So now the moment a PG student brings out a different response, so it contradicts what I have already have in my mind. So usually in the examination, if I am very amiable, then fine. If I am not, I am going to pen through it. Fine. So this is something which we need to completely do away with, and we allow the flow of thoughts. Because at postgraduate level, you are like a tree with a lot of branches. Maybe one student can shake one part of the branch, other student can shake the other leaves, other twigs, and you must not be trembling. So we have to create that kind of a base, allow collective thoughts to come in and allow them to prosper. That's how peer learning happens. If your students have written something, share it with others. Let them also learn, let them also grow. That's the way it should be done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Yes. Any other participants?
Madam, may I?
Yes, Pawan, sir. Please.
Sir, actually, I am also from the Department of Business Administration and Research.
Great.
So, unlike engineering, we can there they can demonstrate with the help of a project or building any kind of certain things. But in case of MBA students, like it may be negotiation skills, selling skills, or certain other skills. So, in that case, how would you like use of technology or this blended learning and certain other things? So, any insights on that, sir?
Very good question, Dr. Pawan. That usually I encounter this question. See, you can plan your session. The most unfortunate part is there in school education. I do not know whether anyone in the participants has got school education, a school teaching exposure or not, because my wife is a school teacher, so I get to see they have to prepare a complete lesson plan. Fine, with each class what they are going to do. My suggestion would be to you, sir, you can plan your session, you plan the interventions. For example, you are teaching negotiation skills. So you do not start with what is negotiation. If I would be teaching that course, I'll straight away introduce a video. Maybe I'll pick up a video from a Bollywood movie or Hollywood movie, depending on the choice of your class or their vernacular background, and start from there. Ask them, because immediately you find something which connects with the youth, is the movie or music, automatically engagement is there. Half of your job is done. First. Second, you talk about what was being done. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it ethical? What is unethical? What is as per law? What is beyond the rule scope of the law? Then you start gradually unfolding upon 1, 2, 3 laws. Then the questions will come, sir, if it is like that, sir, if it is like those. Then you tell them, okay, fine, you read this chapter and come back to next class. Fine, you show the movie again, and then you ask them to deliver it on that. So what will happen, the connect is there, the bind is there, and they will try to do it. And then you give them some assignment to do it, create a role play situations to do it. So that's how what will happen. Your class will not remain a monotonous lecture method, because lecture method are a thing of past. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, lecture method of teaching is a thing of past right now. If we are insisting upon doing it, actually we are regressing, not progressing. That's my humble submission to you, one of you with folded hands. Do not stick to that. Rather, you innovate, you evolve, because that's the reason. If you ideate new things, you will find the students will connect with you automatically and they will ask you questions. If you are not having questions in the classroom, it is not primarily the fault of the students, rather they are unable to connect with you. They will ask you questions, they will bombard with you questions, provided they find a space for them to ask questions. So if you pack your sessions in such an intriguing way, in such an interlacing way, some audio visuals, some assignments, some cases, some presentations, some role plays, some quizzes, there are multitude of props and tools that possibly you can use, and you will find they are so close-knit bound with you, and they themselves will prosper this thing, they will take it forward. Did I answer your question, Dr. Pawan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are already using, but we need to use it extensively. This is what I could take up from this also. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Sir, I just want to ask one question. You talked about knowledge management. Sir, what would be the best way, like providing a ready-made resource to the students, or how we can have it on a medium where it gets updated with the inputs of the students and their experiences also?
Primarily
Am I
talks
audible?
about, yes,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am, you're audible. You're perfectly audible. The basic premise of knowledge management says that every day the knowledge is being created, so there has to be a enterprise-wide system which can capture the knowledge. In absence of that, what I could take from your question is that you want how students could be assisted in learning. So first thing that could be done, you can give them materials. Do not give it to them handout. You create a Google Drive. If you do not have an LMS, you can upload it, and you must upload it at the very beginning of your semester of your course. Let's say I teach business communication. So I have got one textbook, because university students cannot afford much. One textbook, and there are so many other online books are there. I have created a repository for books, study materials, cases, everything is there available online. So whenever I need them, I download and share the link with them. You do it with them. Fine. Second part is about the teaching part. So for them to remain updated, you ask questions. You remain updated, ask them questions. And the class length, they should be knowing that they must come prepared with what has developed. Fine. They should come, sorry, bad throat. They should come prepared, and they would be able to respond your questions. So in a way, what will happen, they cannot complain, I do not have any resources. You will say that it's already there, son, it's there, you can always go, my child, and access from there. Number one. Number two, I am asking you newspaper questions, now you respond. Presentations, business communication, is always on the basis of presentations. You teach them the basic nuances, you tell them this is the way you should present, show them one demonstration, and you improve. You may not like my presentation, I'm not a very amiable person, I'm not the good looking guy, but you are, so you come and present yourself, sell yourself. The moment you put them that kind of trust, the kind of confidence will give in, you will see the transformation gradually happens. So from induced to the mature learners, that journey, you just go for a little bit of hand holding and then let them go. That's what is higher education all about. Thank you, ma'am. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, any other question, participants? Okay. Here I take this opportunity to thank you, Debarshi sir. With this crisis around you also, you have given such a wonderful session, and it was really very informative, which we can use to enhance ourselves, to evolve ourselves in line to this education 4.0, which we have with NEP 2020 vision. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Joining with
Thank
us.
you. Jai Hind. Thank you.
Okay. Instructions for participants. Next session, we have session from 2 to 2:30. We will have connection of audio visual, that is AR VR with education 4.0. So in that session, we'll understand the connection, the theory part of it, and then the practical we are going to see in the industrial visit. So all of you join at 2 o'clock. 2:30 we will end a meeting, Zoom meeting. Then after that, we will go for Thakur employees who are coming for industrial visit. Exactly at 3:30, we will meet in front of administrative office. At 4 o'clock from from the venue of the industrial visit, we'll start the Zoom meeting again. So all of you who are going to attend this industrial visit virtually, please log in again by 3:55 in the same Zoom meeting, and then we will show you whichever we can show you in that premises, yeah, of the industrial visit. Today
You can
now with
keep
this,
the meeting on for till 2 or you will close it?
I will keep it on. I will keep
Yeah.
it on this meeting for till 2 p.m. And today now in this session, whichever quiz link will come, in that we have quiz also included. So after and session 3 attendance, new link you will get in the evening. Those who are coming to industrial visit, their attendance will be taken physically at the venue. Okay, that's it from my side. The meeting is on at 2 p.m. All of you, please be ready at 1:55. We'll start the relation between AR, VR and education 4.0 at 2 p.m. Thank you all.